Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen Bitcoin begin to bounce after this correction. We talked a little bit about this in yesterday's video. So for the rest of today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Bitcoin, diving into the shorter time frames, talking a little bit about where I see the direction headed from here. And then we're going to be diving into my favorite ecosystem, the ecosystem I feel like is going to have some of the biggest profit potential moving forward from here. And then I'm going to be sharing with you guys 3 altcoins inside of that ecosystem that I think are going to be the biggest moving forward over this cycle. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are starting off today's video, and in yesterday's video we talked about how we were going to be expecting some type of a bounce in here. Now what we ended up seeing was Bitcoin making 5 waves down, and now we're starting to see a bounce. But here's the catcher: because of the fact that we saw this 5-wave decline, generally speaking what you're going to find after is an A, B, and a C correction back up. We're probably going to run back up to the 786 to the 618. The 618 is going to be taking us to about 40, just under 43,000. And that's going to be the main target that we're going to be watching for. Kind of just one more little leg up in here. Retest this prior support as resistance. I don't think it's going to end up clearing above, and then we're going to end up starting another decline back down. I think what we end up having is just another impulse to the downside like that. Kind of how we just saw one right here. I think that that's probably what's going to end up taking place right now, and we're most likely going to end up coming back down to about 39,400, which if I draw a line, it's about right there. Or all the way back down, maybe even to the prior high, pretty much at like 38,400. Somewhere inside of that $1,000 range is more or less what I would be watching for. We're mainly just going to have to watch and see how the impulses come down. Because what we're mainly going to be looking at, we have a pretty decent support, which I'm going to use a box just so you guys can see it a little better. If you guys remember, the top of this resistance, that's going to be our most likely area of support on the way back down, and this is right before we ended up breaking out into this high. So I think that that's where we're going to end up feeling out. And we kind of talked about that in yesterday's video, and we come over here. We know that we just entered a new range. If we come all the way to the top of the resistance and then back down to our prior resistance, new support, we're pretty much just going to be filling out this range. And like I said, guys, I think that we've got a little bit more upside in the short term before we end up making one more final low back down. And most likely the best area of support is going to just end up being that prior high before, we probably end up making one more bigger move, either up to 48,500 or maybe even a little bit higher up to about 52,000. That's going to be my next area of demand that I'm watching for. That's going to be how I'm actually expecting the market to play out in some way. We could range inside of this area a little bit longer. We don't have to just immediately break out, but based off the size of the breakout so far, I would expect that, most likely we would go into a little bit of a quicker move rather than just sit here and range. Definitely not something like that, just because I'm looking at this as more of kind of like the end of this move. We've had this really big move off of these lows. The only thing that makes me feel like we could extend a little higher than 48,500 is when we're looking at this, we're kind of looking at this first move going from the beginning of the cycle at 15,300 all the way up to the top of this at 31,000. That was our first impulse, right? And so this was our first corrective wave. If that's the case, then we have a minimum target right here of the 1618, and that's going to be taking us all the way up to about $50,300. So I think that if this is actually going to be a wave 3 impulse, we have to come to at least the 1618 before that's even going to be confirmed. You can't have a wave 3 that's smaller than a wave 1, right? Because when we're looking at this, we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 waves up, and then that entire 200-day consolidation was just our ABC correction as we just trended sideways in that channel. Now we're seeing a wave 3 impulse, right? Because all this was wave 1, wave 2, and now we're inside of wave 3. We have a minimum target of the 1618 because wave 3 can't be smaller than this first impulse. It just can't, based off the Elliott wave theory. And so we have to see it go to at least the 1618, and we can't even exceed, and we could even see it extend higher than that. I wouldn't be surprised. Oftentimes inside of a wave 3, they're going to be bigger than a wave 1. So as I'm looking at this, I see the potential where Bitcoin gets priced up really quickly. It marks up in value a lot faster and higher than people people anticipate. And it's mainly just because when we're really taking the time to analyze the Elliott waves, this shows that we have to go to at least 50,300. So that's going to be even extending a little bit higher than that prior lower high. So I think for a main target, you can't really go wrong betting on the 1618. If it goes higher, great. But that's kind of what I'm thinking we're going to be heading to next before we end up seeing some type of a correction. And it's going to be that wave 4 that's going to be really interesting. Inside of a wave 4, it can't ever go below the top of wave 1. We could come all the way back down and retest wave 1, which would be similar to what we did in 2016, right? Because if you keep in mind, 2016 was this. This was wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. And then this was wave 4. Wave 4 came all the way back down to retest the top of wave 1, right? Before we made the next impulse. And so if we end up doing something relatively similar to that, we could see this wave 4 come all the way back down to retest the prior high of wave 1, which in my opinion would probably be taking us relatively, so it would be putting us almost flush with that trend line that we've been building on up to this point. And so that's kind of what I've been telling you guys. What we're looking at here is kind of just the beginning stages of these impulses. And oftentimes a way that you can gauge these impulses is by looking at these little channels right here. And the Elliott waves are going to follow these channels. And you're going to see them kind of make these little rising wedge type formations. And inside of this wave 5, I think that that would be the one where it kind of clears above, right? But either way, if it comes to those all-time highs, regardless, I'm still anticipating something a little bit more similar to that 2016 and 2017 uptrend, where we're more or less just doing something along the lines of this. Big picture, I still think that we're going to be due for some type of correction in here once we do make this final high up. In the short term with their impulse, all we really have is a wave 1. I believe that we're inside of a wave 4 correction, and then that's going to be taking us to our final wave 5 before this wave 3 is done. So let's make these smaller so it's easier to see. These are all just subwaves, right? These are just minor impulses as we're just beginning this uptrend. We finished wave 1 and we're about to finish wave 3 in here before a wave 4 correction. I think that now is the time where you don't want to get over leveraged. You don't want to be thinking too much about buy only. You know, if you're in a lot of short-term profit with altcoins, always take profit on that stuff. But when we're looking at this, you know, I still think we got one more high, but the wave 4 correction that could follow, we're looking at a decent drop after. Assuming we run up to like, I don't know, let's just say we go to the exact 1618, which is $50,300. If we come all the way back down to that trend line, you're looking at a 34% correction, which historically speaking is almost the exact same levels that we saw in that last cycle of 2016, right? When we're first uptrending, this one was a 30 or a 40% correction. This one was a 40% correction. This one was a 35% correction, right? And so we saw that pretty much the entire way back up. And so if we end up seeing another if we end up seeing another correction back down in here to retest this prior high, that's going to be another 35% sell-off that's ultimately going to bleed the market. So even though I do think that there's going to be a little bit more profit, a little bit more running inside of the markets, I do think that this is what is in store for us big picture. So let's be watching out for that. Now guys, let's talk a little bit about the altcoins, talk about my favorite ecosystem that I think is going to be providing the most profit potential moving forward from here. Alrighty guys, here we are to jump into Arbitrum, and this is the ecosystem that I think is going to end up blowing up the most. When we're talking about why Ethereum sucks, I just paid $50 for a gas fee like a couple hours ago. It sucks, and we're already at the beginning of the bull run. It hasn't even done anything. Can you imagine what Ethereum is going to be like when we get to the peak point of the bull run? A gas fee is already charging me $50, and now we're like at the beginning of the bull run where nothing has even happened, right? So can you really imagine what happens when there's trillions of dollars coming into these markets, when everybody's using Ethereum, when the entire market is congested? It's going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, to send an Ethereum transaction. So I just think that this is important, and ultimately why layer 2s are positioned so perfectly going into this next cycle. And Arbitrum is the leader of the layer 2 narrative. It's been the biggest so far, and it's seen the most adoption long term. Well, when we're talking about what all the other layer 2s are out there, and I think that that's a narrative that's going to continue to play out from here. Now, there is other networks that I think are going to blow up, but when it comes to the layer 2 narrative, I think the Arbitrum is positioned early. It's been the leader so far, and that's a trend that's going to continue to play out. Now, what we talked about in our prior videos was how we were working on this descending resistance, awaiting a breakout, and we also talked about this double bottom formation that was playing out, and what we needed to see was not only a breakout from descending resistance, but if we were able to break out and make a higher high above this resistance, then that was actually a confirmed double bottom breakout. And that would give us a target and a reversal all the way back up to this prior high right here. So when we're talking about this, we saw exactly what we needed. We broke out of descending resistance, we confirmed that trend change, but then we also made a higher high in the process, flipping that resistance of the double bottom. So we have two successful higher highs, and we're kind of just working on some type of move, and it's really just making support and resistance flips in here. If we ended up seeing another correction, it would probably look potentially something like this. That would be the way that I would see the market. And we have talked about that Bitcoin correcting for a lower low on the short term, but I wouldn't necessarily think that if Bitcoin just goes for a small lower low in the short term, I don't think the Arbitrum is going to come all the way down to another lower low from where we held support. I think it would end up just kind of be feeling out this range a little bit more before we still get continuation. And so now that we've broken out and flipped this resistance, the reversal is already set in stage. We're looking at a move into new all-time highs. This entire thing is going to reverse and run into its first cycle, because this really isn't even a cycle. It just got added to exchanges and then had a correction. Like, you could count it as a cycle, but this is going to be the first real move that we've ever seen. And I think that this is going to be one of the more profitable ones that we can target because it is the beginning of this market cycle. So when we're looking at this, if Arbitrum, the token, is about to take off, if it's reversing into new all-time highs, that means all of the other money in Arbitrum is going to be trickling into the other ecosystems as well. So let's talk about three of my favorite picks and why I think that these are going to be so profitable moving forward from here. Now, the first one on today's list is going to be GMX. It's my favorite one in Arbitrum. It's my biggest holding in Arbitrum. It's the one that I've focused the most attention to long term, and I'm currently staking it as well. Now, when we're talking about what narratives I think are going to play out in a big way, I've got a strong confidence that the decentralized exchange narrative will be a big one. Now, with GMX, you're able to participate in revenue sharing through the exchange, through the fees, and that's why I think that these DEXs are going to really do well long term. Not only that, but the fees are relatively high on GMX, which is kind of a downside in a lot of ways. They're probably going to have to fix that in some way to attract more volume. But regardless, all of those fees and all of that volume are generated back to the people that are providing in the liquidity pool. So you can actually earn a good amount of money by participating. And I think that that's ultimately the direction the rest of the DEXs are going to move. Now, the main reason I like this setup so much is just because when we're looking at this, it has stacking one waves, where we're just pretty much beginning this early uptrend, haven't really done anything. But what we're looking at is a wave 1 impulse, a wave 2 correction, and this is just the first one to begin this new cycle. Now, this one right here is another wave 1 and another wave 2 correction. They're both wave 1s and wave 2s, but the difference is this second one is the beginning of a wave 3, right? So wave 3s are the biggest. They're oftentimes the most impulsive, the most money comes into them. So that's why whenever you see 2 1 waves happening on a trend line, it's always right before a much bigger parabolic move ends up playing out. And I think that that's why I've really bet the most into this one, is because it's the oldest one on Arbitrum. It's kind of been the forefront of that. And because of the way that they actually have opportunities to earn based off of the exchange, the fees and all of that, I just think that they've kind of laid the foundation for a lot of these DEXs and how they can actually run their exchange. So when we're looking at this, I still think that this thing's setting up for a much, much bigger move. The only difference is we kind of just have to get to that point. Now, in the shorter time frames, we are pulling back a little bit, and we either have two options. This is either a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 up to this resistance, or this was actually some type of an ABC backup. I don't know what way it's going to be looking, but what I'm seeing in the short term is the potential of this playing out in some type of inverse head and shoulder setup. And if that was the case, that puts us at a target of the all-time highs, right? We would be looking at a flip, a retest of the neckline, as they call it, and then that would give you a target of all the way back up here at the prior all-time highs. Because the way you measure head and shoulder would be from the top of the resistance, the neckline, all the way down to the head. And you take that and you just move it and stack it. See how it comes all the way back up to that prior high? That's what our target would be. And in my opinion, if we end up making an actual inverse head and shoulder and flipping the neckline or this mid-range at $57, I do think that that's where we're going to end up making that move into new all-time highs. And I don't think that we should be underestimating the power of this next breakout, because like I said, we're inside of a wave 3. The next move is an actual wave 3 of 3, right? Because in other waves, you have wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, and then you have wave 5. That's where we're at right now. We're working on this wave 3, and then we still have a whole nother wave 5 to go after that. So we're at the early stages, and that's why I think that this is one of the more bullish setups and why you should definitely be watching it long term. Now, when we're looking at the next one, this is called Grail. or Camelot decks. This is one of the launch pads and swap dexes on Arbitrum, and these are basically the biggest launchpad project on the ecosystem. Now they're worth a decent amount, but when I'm looking at this, this just looks like a 1 wave, a 2 wave, a 3 wave, a 4 wave, and we're working on one more final impulse here. I don't know how high it's going to go. It could get pretty impulsive, but regardless, I think that we're just working on one more move right there. And then we'll end up seeing some type of ABC correction back down, probably back down to this little support at about $1,100. That's kind of what I'm going to be watching for, is something along the lines of this before we fill our way out and then end up running into that next cycle. So when I'm looking at this, this is going to be the leader of the Launchpad project. They've already got their foot in the door. They're already seeing the most adoption when it comes to those projects. And I think that that's something that's only going to continue to play out from here. They have a lot of volume in their 24-hour exchange volume. They have a lot of the most volume on certain pairs inside of the Arbitrum network. And we're really starting to see them cement themselves as that leader inside of the swapping, as that leader inside of just Launchpads as well. I've participated in a couple of them. Some of them haven't performed all that well at launch. So it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to do long term, but I don't think you can go wrong considering all this is just a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, followed by an A, B, C back down. So this is just a big one wave impulse. Regardless of how we end up accumulating, how long it takes going sideways, this thing's most definitely going into a brand new cycle. And the way that these tokens, how small the supply is, I mean, it's already worth $1,600. So given a new cycle, this thing's probably going to be worth, tens of thousands of dollars. Could be worth even in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know for sure. But so far, these are already gaining the most adoption in Arbitrum. They're already seeing some of the biggest runs. Some of the more volume is coming into these markets. And this is one that I don't think you can go wrong because by holding and staking their token, you get access to the launch pads themselves. That is going to be something that is so insanely valuable given a bull run. When you're able to participate in launch pads, you're able to put a small amount in. It's able to do 50 to 100x plus right at launch for you to take profits on. That's why it's so powerful to be able to get access to those. And these sort of things are going to run quickly because you have a lot of whales that are going to be flocking to do the same thing. There's a reason why the price already took off so much from here. So if you give a whole bull run and you've got all of these smart money people, big money people, most importantly, that just have the capital to spend on it, they're going to be shooting the prices up like crazy and then you're going to get priced out of being able to even participate in the launch pads as a whole. So I would definitely be watching out for Grail. You might be able to pick it up at a little bit of a discount over the next couple months. Now the final one on today's video is going to be Magic or Treasure. Treasure or Magic, I guess you could say. It's pretty much the gaming epicenter when it comes to Arbitrum. They're already the first mover inside of that, and there's really not a whole lot of competitors inside of Arbitrum as a whole. Imagine if OpenSea had their own token, that entire NFT exchange, it would be worth a significant amount of value right now. Now, that is exactly what Magic is, the token inside of the Treasure ecosystem. And inside of Treasure, you've got all of these different games. You've got a marketplace to be able to trade them, buy, sell, trade NFTs, but then they've also got an entire gaming ecosystem, and they also have mints that you can participate in. So if you want to participate if you want to buy any of the NFT collections, if you want to participate in any of the mints, anything like that, I think that these are going to do very, very well long term. And there's so much more utility inside of this considering it's more than just what OpenSea is. With Arbitrum being able to gain a lot more adoption this cycle, I don't think you can really go wrong holding it. And the chart really shows that as well. Ever since June, this thing's been uptrending, and it's looking like we're finally at the point where, maybe if we even see one more little pullback in here, come back down to retest like 65 cents, I think that you can't go wrong buying that because this thing's probably going to end up running into a new high back up to about $4. And that's what I'm going to be watching for in the short term. This one started in a lot of ways leading the Arbitrum altcoins during the initial craze of Arbitrum season back in the beginning of this year. And so I think that that's something that's going to continue to play out from here. They've already got so much adoption inside of that market. And with gaming being such a big focal point in my portfolio moving forward in this next cycle and being a narrative I don't think you can bet against, this is really my favorite one in Arbitrum for that purpose. So guys, if you did find value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to see how I'm investing, where the signals were given for these, every single one of these positions has already been given a signal in my group. We've been accumulating all of them. If you guys want to see how we're positioned, which Arbitrum altcoins we're invested in, there's plenty of them inside of my group to buy. If you guys want to check them out, links are in the description to go ahead and actually sign up on my website. From there, you're going to be able to get access. It's just a lifetime access inside my group. One-time payment. So once you're in, you're always going to be in no matter what markets I'm investing in. So thank you all so much. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.